Last question. What do you want to be remembered for?
If I'm very, very lucky, I hope I get remembered for being kind and encouraging for people.
Keith Morrison has achieved that goal. He's known as the grandfather of true crime and the Mr. Rogers of murder. It's not just his comforting voice, it's his commitment to comforting victims while covering the details of the worst nights of their lives. He's more interested in telling their stories than sensationalizing or going overboard. His photographic memory and talent for making interview subjects feel comfortable made him an ideal reporter. He helped Dateline rise above other true crime shows, and he did it all while keeping many of his secrets private. Keep watching to learn the secrets about Keith Morrison's life and time on Dateline. Keith's early life. Keith Morrison was born July 2, 1947. He didn't start with dreams of being a true crime journalist. Instead, he wanted to be a lawyer. That didn't work out because he had a habit of getting into trouble and he flunked out of law school. He was 20 when his minister father suggested he join the fold. He filled in for a minister in a small town. He realized it wasn't the right career path for him after he talked to a woman who had just lost her husband. He knew she needed his help, but he wasn't prepared to give it and had to find another job. He started running errands for a local newspaper editor, and that sparked his interest in journalism. He almost dropped out of that career path as well. That was until he was set to interview a woman whose husband had just been killed in a hit and run. It was, quote, the last thing in the world he wanted to do at the time, but it set him on the right path. How Dateline Formed. News magazine shows were hot in the 90s. Viewers loved their riveting stories. Networks loved the fact that they cost half as much to produce as scripted shows. CBS had 60 Minutes and 48 Hours. ABC had Primetime Live. NBC kept trying and failing to get a successful news magazine, launching 17 of them in the course of 24 years. The 18th time was the charm when Dateline premiered March 31st, 1992. It took what worked from two previous failed one-season shows. That meant combining the human interest stories of Real Life with Jane Pauley and the hard-hitting journalism of Tom Brokaw's Exposé. Pauley and Stone Phillips were hired as co-anchors. The network committed to at least 1 year of the show before it aired. Dateline also borrowed heavily from another popular show, 60 Minutes. It had similar segment lengths, graphics, music, and story structure. The Baltimore Sun even accused them of shamelessly imitating the competition. There were important differences, though. Dateline changed how long it focused on each story depending on its importance. It wasn't afraid to throw in family advice or a bit of humor at the end. 60 Minutes producer Don Hewitt wasn't a fan. He said Dateline was doing fine for itself, but that his show dealt with more serious journalism. How Dateline Got Popular. Dateline wasn't an immediate success, but NBC believed in it because they let it take up the schedule. It began airing only on Tuesday, but then got a second night. It replaced the network's other news magazine, Now, by the end of 1994. It aired 5 nights a week in '98 until May of 2000, when it scaled back to 3. They shifted anchors more than once, but it was Dateline's shift to true crime that made it popular. This began with segments known as To Catch a Predator. They focused on adult members of an organization known as Perverted Justice going undercover in online chat rooms posing as underage kids. If adults in the chat room behaved inappropriately, their chats were saved as evidence. This led to an in-person meeting and usually an arrest. The segment premiered in 2004. They were pricey, took a lot of time to get right, and came under controversy, but were worth the investment. Over 10 million people tuned in at the height of their popularity in 2006. The segments made Dateline realize how popular true crime could be, so they decided to focus on it around 2005. The show was now made up of 2-hour mystery movies. Keith wasn't initially a fan of this shift of focus. He admits he felt odd turning murder into entertainment. He eventually realized that it could expose the shortcomings of the justice system and encourage systemic change. Dateline often focuses on relationships that went bad with the slogan, quote, "It's not about the murder, it's about the marriage." As producer David Cordo said, "It's got good guys, bad guys, conflict over something that matters, suspense, and then resolution. The classic elements of drama and great storytelling." The show maintains this suspense by keeping audiences guessing. It does everything it can to stage surroundings and hide any tells from participants that would give away the ending. One major reason Dateline has stayed popular is that it's managed to avoid the backlash facing other true crime shows like Serial, Making a Murderer, or The Jinx. This is thanks to its straightforward reporting style and willingness to tell stories through the eyes of the victims and their loved ones instead of the killer. How Dateline interviews work. Producer Carol Gable remembers her first time in an interview with Keith. She had prepared a dossier about the case with questions to ask. He showed up with only a small overnight bag even though they'd be gone for 5 days. She didn't know he had a photographic memory and memorized it beforehand. She calls him one of the most well-prepared correspondents she's ever had. He credits the people around him for his successful interviews. He feels well-briefed every time he interviews a stranger, and they don't feel like a stranger anymore when he's finished. As he says,
something else happened. If you are sitting in a room with all these people around you and television cameras, and you're asking people, as I was saying earlier, questions that their spouse wouldn't even ask them, you develop a real affection for this person, even if you don't, may not believe them. It's really a powerful emotion that I come away with.
He says the producers track down most of the stories found in Dateline. The team and correspondents then prepare for the interviews and get the necessary material. They also have to craft it into an interesting show. Producer Robert Dean says Keith is a great help in this area, not only because of his delivery, but also because he's a master storyteller. The experienced anchor isn't fazed by the horrors he experiences in interviews, but has been known to cry in a few of them despite himself. He's also aware he tends to lean on something, which he says he does to look more relaxed and approachable on camera. Being a celebrity. Keith is surprised to have become a celebrity. He was never the type to seek out fame. He said,
most people are very, very nice, and they'll stop and chat, and maybe take a selfie or something. But occasionally, somebody will stop me. And I remember one guy in particular who stopped me one day and said, "You have to talk that way," and then just kept on walking.
They also say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Perhaps that's why Keith has nothing against Bill Hader's caricatures of him on SNL. He found out about it after his daughter told him. He said it was weird but funny, and he should be thankful for the extra notoriety. Bill was a major fan and was filled with glee when they finally met in person. Keith and Matthew Perry. Keith met Suzanne Perry, press secretary to Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, when he was a budding reporter. They were married and had 4 children together, including her son from a previous relationship. That son was the late Matthew Perry, star of the mega-popular sitcom Friends. Keith's spoken about their relationship more than once. He praised his character and talent. Matthew also gave him gifts like a new Porsche. That didn't mean they had a perfect relationship. Matthew wrote in the Washington Post that he and Keith had been in a relentless battle over the attention of his mother. He also referred to their relationship with a reserved tone and wouldn't call his stepfather Dad. Keith isn't surprised, but feels deep grief over the time they've lost. He described Matt's bright personality, saying,
we do this, it's become this funny trope of Dateline, lit up a room, right? We're the center of the room. Well, he was, and he was always the center of attention everywhere he went. That kind of personality. He was goofy, he was funny, he was acerbic, but even if he didn't say a word, he was the center of attention. So yes, that's gone, but you still feel the echo of it everywhere.
Now it's time to hear from you. What's your favorite true crime show? Let us know in the comments section below.